So, John, it's my pleasure to be able to say congratulations and welcome back.
Thank you very much. I it's good to be back, but also at the same time, I was like, oh, I miss where I was.
Yeah, I remember feeling the same way when we got back from our trip.
I gotta say, it's made me really miss the original incarnation of Brat Brat.
Oh, I can imagine. I didn't even think about that. So didn't get full details. What I know it was a river cruise, but what was the general path?
So we flew into Frankfurt and then took a little half-hour hop over in another plane to Luxembourg. And the so the way the river cruise is set up, it was kind of a special river cruise because it was there were a lot of other travel agents there, and they were I guess trying some things out or just wanting to show the product to various travel agents at a particular. There's the way it works. I guess they all have their own independent companies, and then they have a parent company which they do some business under. So like it's all together, and so they all do basically they're part of this company, and they get they have preferred vendors and certain rates and certain things. Just the power of numbers. Even though they're all individually owned businesses, they have a combined power together. And so there's it was a trip with a lot of other travel agents, and I think that's predominantly who was on this cruise. But we started in Luxembourg on the Mosel River and traveled through Western Germany. Spent a day on the Rhine, and then ended on the Main River where Frankfurt's located. And so we had a day in Luxembourg, and we, I think the afternoon of that day, we cruised up to Trier, Germany, and had an evening tour of the city, which was really cool because it's really cool. And I hadn't noticed this, but the architecture in Germany includes Celtic architecture, sort of. A lot of discussion of when the Celts owned there, and then the Romans came in, and there's definitely a lot of Roman ruins that are left. And then you have Gothic, and then I guess that came during the medieval time. Oh, I'm terrible. My art history is how terrible it is showing. But
Better than mine. So.
They have during the medieval times. I guess you had Gothic, and then followed by various Renaissance periods, and then oh man, I realized I didn't get to use my "if it's not Baroque, don't fix it" joke. And then on throughout other types of architecture. Anyway, it's cool. If you look at the euro, it will actually show you. You can actually see the architecture. I think the $5 note or the €5 note is Roman architecture, and the €10 note is Gothic. And I can't remember what follows Gothic, but every note, it's further along. It's newer architecture periods, and I thought that was kind of cool.
That's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
One thing that not to derail it or anything, but one thing that I found interesting, because it just didn't occur to me, is that each country would have its own variant of euros, even though it's a accepted form of payment or tender across all of the European Union.
I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah, the only reason I even knew that is because there were differences in euros that I received in like Ireland as opposed to the UK.
Is the UK? I thought the UK is still in the pound, right?
So to make things more convoluted, yes, you could also use British pounds, but the euro was at the time also an acceptable form of payment. I don't know with Brexit if that has changed.
Yeah, that's interesting. What a mess. Anyway, so we went to the city of Trier, and we were shown various important buildings and the architecture. There's actually a lot of Roman buildings there, and they were really impressive. And like a lot of the Roman structures were well intact, and it was just a lovely walking around in the evening, and it's great because you get to go to all these cities. Like this river, the idea of a river cruise is fabulous because you get to go to all these cities, and you don't ever have to pack up, and you don't have to get into a bus to get there or get on a train. Not that a train isn't a lovely form of transport, but it's a different vibe, and you don't have to rent a car, and you get to go to hop along to all these different cities, pop out into the city, do some tours, explore the city as you please, and you just have to be back on the ship before it leaves. And I'd never been on any type of cruise before. This is the first time, and so that dynamic is really nice. Being able to see all the cities and not have to pack up and have to do the travel part. On top of that, the room is like a little, decent size boutique hotel. I'm told it's much bigger than anything that's on an ocean cruise liner, and I can say that it's. Like it was lovely because you got a bed in there, and they were really intelligent with how they designed the room. It's not everything is at a right angle. They had things at different angles to like actually make good use of the space. And on one side of the room, it's all window, and you can see what you're cruising along on from the outside, and you can open the window at night, hear the water. And it's lovely. I'll say the bathroom was big enough for me to like move around in the shower without. It's a small shower, but I'm a big person, and I didn't feel like I was too cramped in there. So, really interesting to be able to have that big of a room, but on a ship that's moving around, and it's a lovely room. And then on top of that, you have like this all-inclusive sort of aspect of it because all the meals are included, and they have a dining room on one level, and then they had like a lounge that would have like buffet lunches on one level. And a couple of times during the week, because we had such good weather every day, we had they grilled out up on the top deck, and we ate like on the top of the ship, which was really cool.
Were there specific hours for like each of the different places, or was there enough overlap that at any time of day you could duck into a place and grab a snack or something?
So I never, it felt like, so there were a lot of tour options. Like pretty much every city we went to had multiple tour options that were included. Almost all of the tours were included in the package that we got. There was there's one tour that we went on that was like an additional 70 euros. But it was a really cool tour. So it depended on the day. Like I never felt like I didn't get enough time in each of the cities that we visited. But it really depends on the day on the day. So every evening at 6:45, we'd have a port talk, and they would just make sure that, because it is a river and there are other ships and barges on the river, and, water levels vary. Every day we got, in the next, every evening we got, this is what we expect to be doing on the hour, hourly times of the based on what was happening for the next 24 hours. So, I felt like with all of the tour options that we had, I didn't feel like I felt like I had enough time in every city because we could see a lot of things. So I think that first evening after our tour in Trier, I think we also cruised again overnight to the next city. I can't remember if we cruised overnight or if we just went in the morning. There were a lot of times where there were a lot of evenings where you could stay out in the city until about 4 a.m. and then the ship would start cruising around 4:30 or 5 in the morning, so that we'd get to the next port early enough in the morning so that we could disembark to go and do things in that city after breakfast. So a lot of the times, a lot of breakfasts were spent with the ship going up the river.
Where was the final destination? Like you started, Luxembourg, you said, right?
Yeah, the final destination was Frankfurt.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, and I knew you mentioned it, I thought that was more. So what was the timeline for the cruise then? Was that like 3 days, 4 days? Or am I just compressing it a lot in my mind?
Oh, it was 7 days.
Okay.
So
it was just kind of a slow flow.
It was, and that what allowed for all the stops and having plenty of time to do the things and go on the tours and see the cities. And so.
Yeah, because in my mind I was equating it more like what you would think of as a traditional ocean or sea cruise, as far as like speed and distance traversal and everything else, even though I knew they wouldn't be equivalent. But I didn't think about the concept of making it just a kind of a leisurely traversal of the river, and as opposed to seeming to need to rush from one place to another.
Yeah, so I've never been on a traditional cruise, so I don't know how to compare it. I mean, I only know what people have said.
Yeah, and I haven't either. I was just thinking about the amount of distance typically traveled, and you think about the differences between a 3-day and a 5-day and a 7-day cruise. Just when you read up on the descriptions, and it doesn't seem like it's as leisurely as you're describing the river cruise. Not to necessarily say that you couldn't easily spend more time in each of the cities. It just sounds like it at least felt like you were getting enough of an experience in each place, where my one big hesitation with traditional like ocean liner cruises is that I'm not satisfied with a part of a day in a port.
Right. So, I feel like, what I know about traditional ocean cruises, it's like you get part of a day in a port, and then you might be at sea for a couple of days, and that's why there's so many things. That's so much to do on the ship itself. So, and that kind of seems less interesting to me, because I was like, I don't want to, I don't know if I'm going to be.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but in this case, I was just thinking that I would compare the ship for a river cruise to be more consistent with the idea of using a train or something else, where it's a comfortable enough place to relax and sleep, and you can get some food, but it's really just a method of transport that's comfortable.
Yeah, it's probably the most comfortable method of transport you could possibly do, because it's your hotel room. But the limitation is, if there's a place you want to see that's not on a river that one of these ships can go on, well, you can't do a river cruise to that destination. So that's the biggest limitation. But Becca was telling me there's like 7 or 8 cruise lines that do this in Europe. And I was looking. I just went to the web. I think yesterday I went to the website of the cruise line that we went on, and just the number of offerings that they have is overwhelming. They have so many different cruises all over Europe. All lengths of time. It's really quite a lot, and I was surprised by that, and I didn't realize how popular it was.
Yeah, it's not something I had heard of up until you mentioning, the trip, and it makes sense. To one, of course, I wouldn't have heard of it anyway. I'm not a really astute, finding different methods of travel person. I'll fly there, I'll rent a car, I'll get on a train. I don't mind using the methods of travel that I know, and so I don't look for alternatives. But the other reason too is Emily gets motion sick, and so even though, in my opinion, the larger boats, it's not really a problem, that's still I don't know if I want to commit to it without having, a day experience on something larger to kind of see and understand. Right. So that's just never been on my radar to look.
Yeah. So if motion sickness is an issue, a river cruise is probably going to be just fine. I have an unreasonable anxiety about being on boats, yachts, ships. I'm not sure. At some point, a boat becomes a ship in the yacht area. If you were to consider a spectrum of water-going vessels.
Yeah, I know what you're referencing. So.
Yeah, so I don't know where it becomes a ship, but it's somewhere in the yacht section. But I can. Before this trip, the last time I was on a vessel, it was the ferry from wherever in the river, Riviera Maya. We're near we all call it Cancun, but Cancun is a specific city, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on that coast. Between that and the mainland of Mexico and Cozumel, and I remember getting in this vessel, and it's probably like a big yacht, just not nice, and actually we went below deck, so there were windows, but they were at eye level, and we're going, and I'm I had a lot of anxiety, but I'm I know this is fine, but I felt very anxious because of how much motion I could feel. And that's a reason why I haven't I haven't really pursued getting on an ocean cruise liner, because I know there is, even though it's a much bigger ship, I know there's some amount of rocking, and I'm told it's very, especially if you have a stateroom with a window view or a balcony or something, it's very relaxing because you can hear the water and it's a gentle rocking. That's what I'm told. And but I do, in my head I was I do have some level of anxiety, and I also have a level of anxiety about you look in every single direction and all you see is water. I don't know why. But I don't have any sort of I typically don't have any anxiety about flying. We flew over the Atlantic Ocean, didn't bother me. Whenever I've been in an airplane where it's dropped a couple 100 feet, a lot of never so much turbulence that the masks have dropped down. But I've been in an airplane with a decent amount of turbulence, and it's not my favorite, but it doesn't. I don't have that same kind of anxiety that you might expect someone to have. So it's really interesting.
I was actually about to say the exact same thing that excuse me, that I find that fascinating. Not necessarily the fact that you have anxiety, but just the fact that it's those specific cases that's seemingly contradictory in some ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I get it. I don't have I have no issues flying. I have no issues on the water in general. I have no issues with roller coasters. For the most part, there's not anything as any kind of mode of transport that bothers me. but I have an issue with like standing too close to the edge of a cliff.
Oh, totally. I don't like that either.
And I don't know why, because I certainly have no problems with the thought of skydiving, even though I haven't done it yet. It's still on the list of things that I want to do. It just, I think the big difference is knowledge of some sort of safety mechanism as opposed to lack of any safety mechanism.
I think for me, like I have a similar anxiety around cliffs, and I've come to find that I don't trust other people. I don't trust other people being near the edge of cliffs because I can't control them, and I don't trust being around other people when I'm near the edge of a cliff because I can't control them. But if I'm alone and there's nobody near me that could touch me or do anything to me, that anxiety goes way down. Maybe even non-existent. And so I find that interesting. The other thing that I thought about planes where I think I don't have that anxiety is because I totally understand how planes work. Like I understand the basic principles of you keep air moving quickly over the wing, you're fine. And so because I never think about like, oh, both engines fail, can't do that, plane doesn't work, it falls out of the sky. That seems like, oh, that's not going to happen for the following reasons, as why that just isn't a typical thing to happen. So all of that to say, the river cruise is like completely smooth. Like there's no motion that you feel. The water is smooth. The ship itself is stable and smooth. There's no rocking. You feel more movement from the vibration of the engine than you feel any amount of water. And there was one particular day, I don't know exactly what happened, so I can't say that they missed where we were supposed to dock and for folks to disembark, or they passed it on purpose and turned the ship, did it like a 180 in the river, and went back to disembark on a particular side. I feel like they probably missed it, but I'm not sure. But we did a 180 twice that morning in the middle of the river. So that was the only time I sort of really felt anything. But again, it was not a rocking motion. It's like I'm in it's like when you turn in a car, you feel the motion of turning in a car. It's more like that than it's, oh, I feel a change in steadiness of the surface that I'm standing on.
Yeah, so the largest vessel that I've ever been on was like one of the casino boats out of Port Canaveral.
Yeah,
which was fun. I had no issues with it whatsoever. I enjoyed it. I've always wanted though to be on like a historical recreation of an old sailboat. I would imagine that would be the one that might be enough to get me sick. Like the amount of movement on modern boats, in my opinion, unless you're in the middle of a storm, it's just not enough. And I'm not overly prone to motion sickness anyway, so I just don't expect any issues. But I would love to be on like an old recreation of a pirate ship or something, just to see what it felt like.
Yeah. I think after a while, I guess you would get used to it, or you would never get used to it, and you just don't do it for that long. So,
yeah, I expect it's the kind of thing that, like most everything else, like the main reason we don't feel movement as much in vehicles as we should is because we get used to it over time.
Yeah. We're completely acclimated to that kind of motion. Have you ever, are you familiar with the Drake Passage?
It sounds familiar, like I've heard of it, but I would not say that I know for sure what you're talking about.
So yeah, you've probably heard it, but it's a 500-mile stretch of open ocean that is unobstructed by any landmass, that separates South America from the archipelago of Antarctica. So it's the shortest distance a ship can travel to get to Antarctica. and it's common. They commonly cross cruise ships cross it for folks going to visit Antarctica. I saw this and watched some pretty cool YouTube videos of some folks going on that cruise because they went to Antarctica, and that cruising is usually 48 hours at cruising across the passage, which seems pretty fast to go 500 miles in 48 hours for a ship. But they say it is, on average, they have something like 6-meter swells.
That would be enough to feel it.
Oh,
I would think.
I think it's one of the.
I was being generous.
It is quite a lot. Trying to remember.
I don't know specifics by any means. I haven't looked it up, but I would think that the average swell for most experienced outside of storms for most cruise ships would possibly be in the 2 to 3 meter range at most.
So it's not. I remember reading this, and I wanted to go back and look it up. It's not uncommon for the ships to experience 12-meter swells.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
So the video I watched, the folks on their way down to Antarctica got really lucky, and they had calm seas, and I think they had like 1 meter. Like the swells were 1 meter. So that's like. It was they were told it was uncharacteristically calm, so much so that they made the passage in like I think they 10 hours less than normal. I think they did it in under 40 hours, and everybody was excited, happy, and had got to Antarctica much faster than expected. But they said on the way back they had massive swells, and it's like nobody could sleep, and it was I don't know. I feel like I don't know if I could do that. I mean, you're stuck there, so you have no choice. But I don't know. I feel like I would be so uncomfortable and so anxious.
Like I don't know how I would react, but it makes me want to try it, and I think that's the difference. Like I don't feel any thought of anxiety at the prospect. I just feel that almost adrenaline-like kind of feeling of let's see how it goes, but it's not like an amped up yes let's do this kind of thing that you would expect from an adrenaline rush. It's more
like something you would do with like skydiving, as you mentioned earlier,
right? This sounds more like I don't know what that would be like, and I'm kind of curious, more kind of mindset. Maybe it's that piece of me that is always at least intrigued by experiences that I haven't had. So there's no general anxiety about it. It's more, that's fascinating. I wonder what that's like. It's not so much a desire to then say, yes, let's go do it, like you would think from, an adrenaline rush. Again, thinking about someone who says, yes, let's go skydiving and we're going to drive up there tomorrow kind of thing. Like I would have no problems never doing it, but it does pique my curiosity.
Yeah, does not pique my curiosity. It's a hard no for me. I don't know why, because I don't know which is safer, a ship or an airplane. I don't know, because I also understand how ships work, and out there I was like, it's pretty unlikely that unless even if you have these massive swells, if they're not swells from a storm, it's the reason it's so, the water's so, I guess you could say rough or violent, but is because there's nothing to stop it. And so whereas you don't, typically you might find those kind of that kind of water in a storm. This is just happening because of the nature of where it is on the earth. So it's not for me. Like I don't like the idea at all. Like to the extent of like if I'm ever going to go to Antarctica, I'm going to go on an airplane.
I mean, I can understand both for sure. I think the only reason I don't have that anxiety in general, and this is just kind of backing away from that and thinking about you mentioning like the anxiety of not being able to see land necessarily, if you're on the water, that kind of thing. I love the water, and having so much experience in and around the water, including diving and everything else, it's just I've never felt that anxiety. I've always felt the curiosity and wonder at what else I could see that I haven't seen before. And I think that's the only reason I don't have that anxiety, because I'm certainly not a proficient enough swimmer to swim from like the location where I could not see land to where I could see land without assistance. I'd have to have either a flotation device to help alleviate the, just physical exertion, or luck upon a life raft, or, I know that I could not swim from where I could not see shore to where I could see shore without assistance, but I still don't have that level of anxiety about not being able to see the shore. And I'm not saying that that's the cause of yours either, but like that's my thought process on it. And it makes it even more fascinating to me as a result, because it's almost like I would at that point say, if I can't see shore and there's a problem, I'm doomed if the boat doesn't, or some other vessel or something else doesn't come along and help. And it's still not anxiety inducing, which makes it, that's the part that I find fascinating, because I would think that logically thinking through it like that and recognizing the inability to just, exert yourself to the point of getting to safety should be a cause for the induction of anxiety. And I don't know why it's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting why certain things are and are not. So
and we could certainly tie this into overall, like, anxiety is not a rational concept anyway.
Right.
It does not follow, logical theories and thought processes.
But you could probably trace it to something.
Sure. I would not discount that in general. It's just going to be that whatever you trace it to is going to vary on an individual basis.
I feel like certain things, agreed. But I feel like certain things you might be able to trace it to. Oh, I now understand, and it's logical why you have this illogical anxiety, or it might be like it's completely illogical why you have this illogical anxiety. But
and just to add in, the other piece of it could very much be that you trace it to this logical thing, but this logical thing is just a irrational fear based on
right.
whatever mental process creates this irrational fear.
Yeah.
Like, just because you can trace it to something doesn't make it as a whole rational either.
No. I don't think it ever makes it rational. It just, like, the anxiety is typically always going to be irrational, but there could be a logical reason why you have this irrational fear, or there could be an illogical reason why you have an irrational fear. So, are there any? Yeah, I guess I was about to say, are there any rational fears? And like, there are many. I had a moment, yeah. But I don't. I'm a strong swimmer. I like you wouldn't be able to. If I'm as close to land as possible where I couldn't see land, I don't expect that I can make that kind of swim unaided. But like, I'm a very strong swimmer, but I also have a healthy respect for water, because when man versus water always wins. Water never gets tired, currents never get tired, and so forth. So, I know that It
so
doesn't
it's
take
fascinating
a lot.
that you say it that way, because it's an understanding among those people who spend enough time around water that is difficult to explain to others. And I think you did a better job of attempting to explain it than I ever have. Because that's just it, right? I know, like, perfectly calm, everything going my way, maybe I'll make it. But I know that that's never going to be the case. And I know just a general understanding of how difficult it can be to swim in currents and everything else. I don't have a good way to describe that at all, because I guess I don't think about it in that way. It's just a tacit understanding of this is the danger that water poses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, people often underestimate water. It's even like a small, low-flowing creek, it poses a lot more danger than most people expect. And so, I think it was last summer I had like the closest encounter to the most dangerous encounter I ever had in a water setting. And it was, I'm trying to remember the exact details, but it was in a place where I wouldn't have expected to have had any sort of issues. But, I was going to say, like, it's, I have, a fair amount of anxiety about being on a ship, like an ocean cruise liner. But at the same time, I take a 16-foot, kayak on rivers all the time, and I have no fears there. I've taken them out into, out in the Gulf of Mexico, and nowhere far, like not far at all, but just paddling around in off the beach, and I've been in some areas where, like, I've been in a channel that's designed to go from a bay to the Gulf, and it was a choppy day. It was a 1 meter swell, but it's like to the point where when you're at the trough and you have crest all around you, I couldn't see anything but the water directly around me. But that didn't bother me at all. So it's kind of funny, like a much less safe vessel was not problematic. I think for me, it goes back to control, and being out of control is probably the source of my anxiety.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So my most dangerous water story is kind of interesting. When I think it was mid 90s, it might have been late 90s. There was a point where we saw so much rain in the southeast that a lot of rivers were finally closed to anybody coming and spending time on them because of flooding and everything else. Do you remember that general period, to be able to put a timeline on it by chance?
Maybe late 90s, like 98 maybe?
That's kind of what I was thinking, but I think it was before then. Irrelevant in general. Like there were... all it does is just say that it was sometime, pre-2000 for those younger viewers or listeners out there. But there was a period of time where we had received a lot of rain. I was with a scout troop, and we were going to go float in tubes down the Flint River. This was a very common, activity in general, one that we did multiple years in a row. The week after we went, they closed it because of how dangerous it was with the water levels and the swiftness of the current. So, and it's not like it was much different from when we went. Like from when we went, there was a little bit of additional rainfall, but like the actual water level and everything else was pretty similar from that week to the next week. I just remember we were moving so fast that none of us actually got out of the tubes because we were afraid that we wouldn't be able to get back on them, that they would be kind of pulled, ripped away from our grasp almost because of the drag and everything else. that didn't stop us from, being who we were when we get to places where we felt like it was a little less, swift. But I just remember that trip and the proximity to when we took it versus when they closed it, and a couple of different stories about people who had been pulled under in the preceding week or so. Like, just the timing of everything coincided with, we really should not have been on the water.
Yes.
And we were anyway. And we had a blast, and we had no problems, and we didn't really realize how dangerous it was for us until after the fact. So that, I think, is the big piece that illustrates how dangerous water can be.
Oh,
because
yeah.
you can be there, you can be in the moment, you can be enjoying yourself and doing whatever activity you're wanting to do, and not recognize the danger it poses at that exact moment until you hear about things that happen after the fact.
Oh, no doubt. I remember
I was just going to sum up with that recognition of the danger of water, I think, is why I also don't have that anxiety about it. Like, it's just I accept that danger as a natural premise.
Same. And then also, like, when you have a good PFD, it makes a big difference. I can remember the very first, this did not go to plan on a trip. It was back in 2016, January of 2016. It was a weekend, like a paddling and camping trip. But it was one of those January weekends where the highs got in the 60s. And so it was just perfect weekend, sunny, 60s. I was paddling with, I think there were 9 of us on a river in South Alabama called the Big Escambia Creek. Beautiful river. It was flowing, we'd gotten rain that week, fair amount of rain earlier that week, and so the river was flowing a bit faster than normal, but not particularly dangerous. However, where we put in, just around the bend, out of sight, where you couldn't see it from the put in, there was a large eastern red cedar that had fallen into the river and was spanning almost the width of the river. And because the current was a higher current than normal, you'd get around the bend and you're like, oh no. And it looked like you should go one direction, to the river right, but just the current was such that you actually couldn't make it that. Unless you were already over there, you wouldn't be able to make it around the tree. And I was the first one in the river, and I was relatively new to paddling. And I was in a canoe. It was before I had owned my own kayak. And I was just I didn't know. I was trying to go to the right, couldn't go to the right, knew I wasn't going to make it. It's going to be a problem. So I just went straight into the tree and lodged my canoe under the tree. And I was totally fine because of my if your boat's going straight, the water just diverts around it because that's what the shape of the boat is designed to do. It's as soon as you get off axis a bit, then the water's gonna push the boat sideways and then probably come over the side and you capsize. So I was in a good position, safe. I had no idea what I was gonna do, but there were 8 other people behind me, and that's what caused the problem. At some point, I ended up abandoning ship and jumping in the water and going under the tree, and that was no big deal. And, the boat came along as well. The water was very cold because it was January, but all but 3 people fell in the water. And I remember one guy, his boat, he was in a sitting kayak and it filled with water, and he never found his boat. Completely lost the boat. I just remember him floating down the river and yelling out, has anyone seen my boat? And I thought he was joking. I thought, he just got separated from it. And no, it filled with water and was gone. And it was a little bit amusing until I realized, he lost his shoes that he liked and lost his boat, and that was no fun. But I remember helping people that I'd see them go down and come up. And I remember one person come up and they wanted to scream, but the water was so cold that they couldn't shout out. But it was a lot of fun. It was one of those like it's fun to talk about afterwards, type 2 fun. And but I do remember after being in the water for about 45 minutes, like the numbness of my toes was like, oh, this is probably getting dangerous and having to get out. But that was like, it didn't feel at any point that anything was life-threatening, but it was like an ordeal. And in retrospect, having the experience that I have now, I would have been standing in my boat shouting people to go river left instead of river right, which is what everyone tried to do until they realized they weren't going to make it. But it was like one of the second or third paddling trips I'd ever been on, so I didn't know. But the one that I didn't get to say, the one that actually really was frightening was last year. I was going down the Coosa River near Wetumpka, Alabama, and I was just going through a Class 1 rapid, and I had my life jacket on, but I didn't have it zipped all the way up, and that was where the problem is, because if it's not zipped, it'll keep you afloat, but it's not gonna like pull your body up. It's just gonna keep you from going down further. Or if you can imagine, if you're trying to pull a vest off of your body and the entire vest is above your body except for what the holes where your arm are going through, that's kind of what happened. And I went through this small Class 1 rapid, fell off my boat, but I fell in the water in just the right spot where I couldn't swim up. I'm a strong swimmer, and I couldn't swim up. It was the power of the water going over, which, again, very small amount of water, but there's a lot of power in a little bit of water. It kept pushing me down. And the only reason I think I did not drown was that I had grabbed the handle on my boat, and the river pushing my boat and me holding onto it pulled me out of the downforce of the rapids.
That is scarier to me than the other by a long shot.
Yeah, it was way scary. And there was it was probably maybe 30 seconds that I was underwater. Plenty of, I can routinely swim 50 yards underwater, no problem. And that takes like 45 seconds. But when you're not prepared to hold your breath for that long, it's a little bit more difficult. And I probably took in a gulp of water because I know I came up coughing. But I was down there long enough where like everybody that was paddling with me that day was like got really frightened that I was underwater for so long. But I really...
Well, it sounds like it was long enough that you had that moment of, am I going to get another gasp of air as well?
I just remember thinking, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. I remember like kicking and trying to swim up, and I was like, I don't know how. And just the fact that eventually the current pushing my boat forward pulled me out, I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I would have done. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't been holding on. Maybe I would have been able to ball myself up a little bit more and get out of that. And go down far enough, because like holding onto the boat also prevented me from going deeper. But at the bottom of the river, it's a bunch of rocks, so I don't know that I wanted to go deeper. I don't know. Yeah,
it's one of those situations where you can theorize about it a lot after the fact, and none of it ever seems good, right? It's
right.
It all of the scenarios that you think of could have been worse or could have been better if under certain circumstances. But it goes back to respecting the water. There's never an instance of me getting into a body of water where I don't have this. Maybe it's a fleeting thought. Maybe it's just kind of a subconscious acknowledgement that whatever I'm doing, it doesn't matter how mundane it seems, whatever I'm doing, this could very well kill me. And there's an acknowledgement of the power of water without being afraid of it. And that's a very interesting dynamic, because that's the only reason I'm not anxious about getting in the water.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I want to make sure because like at some point somebody would be listening to this and they're like, he should have been wearing his life jacket properly. It must be said, had that PFD been zipped properly, I do not think that I would have been in that ordeal at all. I might be wrong, but I know that I went a little too deep in the water because it wasn't, and I got stuck a little, got stuck in the down force of the rapid because it was not properly. I was not wearing it properly. So
I will say that is a good thing to call out, just to make sure, in general that we mention it. I also though want to mention that both of us, our mindsets would be that to assume that you would recognize that was partially a problem, but it is good to clarify that there is recognition that was partially the problem.
Yeah, I'd have to say that if you're not wearing your PFD correctly at all times, there is that shows a lack of respect for how dangerous the water is. So, in that moment, even though I know water always wins, I was not respecting the power there.
It's the same thing with diving. So the most common cause of diving accidents is someone who got complacent with a specific thing. Either it's not diving with a buddy, or not diving with reserves, or electing to not be as stringent and spend a little extra time thinking, well, I'll do it anyway. I've got enough, that kind of thing. There's a reason throughout all of your training, you're taught to maintain very specific things. Maintain enough of a reserve that you can spend time doing your safety stops. Maintain a buddy. Never dive alone. If you're going to dive alone, make sure you have a couple of reserve emergency tanks that are attached to you that you can swap to. There's a reason all of these different caveats exist. And it's because 90+% of the time, death could be potentially negated if those safety recommendations were followed.
I feel like it's like none of those safety recommendations are needed for best case scenario, but you can never plan on best case scenario.
That's a very astute way to word it.
Yeah. Some of work life has been like, I'm only planning for best case scenario, and I need to stop that.
A lot of life in general
yes.
seems to revolve around that.
Well, when you're a stupidly optimistic person, you think about best case scenario.
That opens up a whole nother question. So am I an optimist, a realist, a pessimist, or something in between?
So, sometimes a pessimist is a realist. Sometimes that Venn diagram is the same circle.
Yes.
So
the funny thing about that whole series of thought and questioning, 90, wet finger in the air, I don't actually have proper statistics on it, but I'm going to say 90% of the time people don't think it through. All of those things can happen simultaneously. It all depends on the specifics of the scenario and the action, etc. So if you are ever exclusively one, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. You in various scenarios, you should always be some shade of each of them.
Yes.
And if you're not, if you find that you always are a pessimist, it's time to reevaluate the way you think about things.
Yep.
And if you're always an optimist, same thing. Sorry to tell you, you can't be that positive and be
realistic,
operating within this framework of reality. Yeah,
that is correct.
But that's a whole separate discussion. I certainly don't want to derail us into that one, because that could be problematic.
So I think I would like to just add, like, going with the I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's like, the glass is half empty or half full. The realist is going to say, well, the scientist will be like, well, it's all the way full. It's like half full of water, half full of air. The pessimist will say that it's half empty, and that's not incorrect. That is in accordance to reality, because we're talking about water, not air, and the scientist is being too literal. The optimistic person say it's half full of water, and the true pessimist is like, it's water, but it's probably poisoned.
It seems like I've seen. I paused enough because I felt like I could probably cut it there. It seems like I've seen another variation of that one, and I'm having a trouble thinking about it. But like the optimist perspective is, of course, half full. Pessimist is half empty. Actually, the realist is that it's like, I don't know. I'm struggling, and again, this is why I paused, because I want to be able to cut this section. But I've heard a different variation on it that didn't have the pessimist talking about, well, sure, it's half full, but it's probably poisoned. Like there was a different level of, was it sadistic person? No. I think there was a pessimistic view, and then there was something else. And I'm having trouble thinking of what that something else was.
I remember I was asking people, like friends and coworkers, like 20 years ago, the question, and when we're done with this, we'll pause so you can have another edit point. But I just remember, I'm like, oh yeah, it's half full of water, half full of air, and I remember somebody like, oh, water, I love water, and somebody was like, water, oh, it's poisoned, and then one of my favorites was, it's not my glass, but I am going to drink it. That's the opportunist.
Yes. Yeah.
And the one who's like, oh, I love water. That's the whimsical person.
We need more whimsy.
No doubt. All right. Should we create another edit point right here?
Sure.
And then I can start talking about day 3.
Sounds good.
So on my trip that I just got back from on day 3, we spent the whole night in the second night in Trier, and I want to say we started moving in the morning around breakfast time to the next city, which was the city of Bernkastel Kues. What's interesting is in the olden days, you'd have a city on one side of the river, like Bernkastel, and another city, completely separate city, on the other side of the river, like Kues. And in modern times, they combine, and so now they're a single city, I guess, with a single government. And so now you have Bernkastel Kues, and that's going to be like an extra special city, because it was the first time I'd been to a castle. The morning excursion was that we had a hiking trip up to a castle, and we had a delightful German guy named Jürgen who spoke to us about the castle, its building, like the history of the castle, history of the wine in the region, because everywhere that we went, it was all wine country, Riesling. And it's a very specific, one of the only places in the world where the Riesling grape does well, and it has to do with, as with any wine country, that particular grape does very well in that area, based on the amount of sunshine it gets, the high and low temperatures throughout the year, and so forth. The first time I'd had Riesling, I didn't care for it because it tends to be a sweet wine, but it turns out there's variations. They have medium dry and very dry wine, and the dry Riesling tastes like a nice Sauvignon Blanc. So there's a much wider range of Riesling wine. But he went on to describe about the wine in that region and how it how influential it was to the people's lives and so forth. And anyway, we hiked up to this castle. It was mostly in ruins, but it did have, it's kind of cool because like a lot of these places, they have cafes or restaurants there. And I did something that I did particularly special was went to the top of the castle with Becca and asked her to marry me. And she said yes. And so it was really cool to do it at the top of a castle.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty phenomenal story in general. Like, it certainly beats mine. I will spare any details. We may come back to that in a future episode, but mine was far less memorable than on top of a castle.
Yeah, I wanted to do something. She loves to travel, and so I wanted to do something while we were traveling. And it didn't occur to me prior to this how big of a deal it was for everyone that was around us. Everyone got real excited, and then it occurred to me, it's like most of the folks that take river cruises aren't young folks, and so they never have this. And word of our engagement beat us to the boat, and we were greeted with flower petals thrown at us and a glass of sparkling wine, and it was really cool. And the folks there were just so lovely, and the people in the city of Bernkastel Kues, they were very excited about it. They asked that we send them some pictures, and they put it on their Instagram stories that day, and I thought that was really cool too. Everybody, it was really sweet.
It's a very, very much a small town, tight knit community feel.
Yes, yeah. Because all of these initial towns that we went to, all the first towns that we went to, were very small. It's a village of maybe a few thousand folks. I can't quite tell. It was a little bit difficult to tell. I know that we one day we cruised past a village of 3 houses. That was it. So I guess 2 houses make a village. 2 houses or more, that's a village. So, or at least 3, because it was called a village and there were 3 houses.
I'm real quick question. I'm just curious about the style of the castle. Was it more like Renaissance era, or are we talking older stone like you would expect from a medieval castle, or just age of, or rough estimation of when the castle was built?
I think it was more medieval.
Okay. I just know there are very distinct styles, right? Like you kind of mentioned this with the architectural piece before. Like, just because it's a castle, there's a big difference between a castle built in ancient Roman times and a castle built in what's generally accepted the European medieval area, or a castle built post-medieval era and during the Renaissance. They may share a lot of commonalities, but there is still a distinct difference in style. So just for the sake of me trying to kind of visualize it, very rough estimate of which era it fell into is all I was after.
Yeah, if I had to guess, it would have been medieval style, just based on the ruins and the material they used, and the style itself. Because I'm trying to think. It's pretty medieval. I can send you a picture.
Sure. I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be now either. Like, as we've talked about it, I'm kind of curious about the offerings for the different river cruises as well. So that might be something to look at in the future. And just to clarify, this goes back to why I opened the show with congratulations, and so I'll repeat it again because it is significant enough to bear emphasis.
Yes, thank you. We were very excited. So, I sent you a picture in your. It should be in your messages. That looks pretty medieval, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly fits with what I would think of. Oh yeah, I mean, it has to be. Um, like it's very much in line with the different castles that we saw throughout the UK/Ireland adventure. Most of them being like you take that first picture that comes up, very simplistic almost is the way to describe it. Like you can tell that it's not trying to be stylized, it's trying to be functional. And that seems to be kind of the hallmark of a quote unquote medieval era castle.
It looks like it was built in the 13th century, just perusing the Wikipedia page. I think late 13th century. So smack dab in the medieval times. Because it doesn't have a lot of, it's not very ornate. It looks very functional more than anything.
Right. So, like, one of the things that was fascinating for us when we went and did our trip, Thornbury Castle was a castle where King Henry and Anne Boleyn stayed, if I remember correctly. And the exterior of the castle was very much in the same style, but it was also aesthetically pleasing. And so it blended the line between functional medieval era castle and what could have followed afterward. Whereas driving through Ireland and seeing a couple of different castles that were very much functional and there was no aesthetically stylized aspect to it whatsoever. It was just obviously functional. It kind of cemented that there was a shift over the course of the medieval era into the ensuing Renaissance era, where a lot of things changed. And so even though it's a castle, that was kind of the thing that made me realize the same thing you would think of when you think about architectural styles with regard to commercial properties or even residential properties, and seeing that transition over time. For some reason or another, that just never came to mind until I saw it in person. Like, you know, prior to that, thinking of a castle always evoked the image of a medieval castle in my mind.
Yeah, I either thought of a medieval castle or like Cinderella's castle, and which I would have, you know, and if you'd asked me, I would have said that's also a medieval castle, but I don't think that it actually is. I didn't realize how many castles were around, and I didn't realize, castles they don't have to be massive, but they can be massive, and so, there are a lot of castles. There was one day we saw, like 24 castles, just going down the Rhine River. They're just on every other hillside. And
I kind of feel like this is a uniquely American issue, like
probably.
Viewing, because we don't grow up around castles, right?
Right.
Our country wasn't formed when castles were the predominant method of building, locations to be fortified.
Right. Or a good place to collect money.
Right.
Like a lot of these castles on the river were like, hey, we want you to pay your taxes.
Yeah. Like a number of castles that we saw in Ireland were single towers.
Right. And it's like, when does it go? And again, I guess it's like, when does a boat become a ship? When does a garrison or a rook become a castle? So,
It's funny to mention a rook specifically because a rook would be a castle. All right, so I know we've had a couple of digressions over the course of the episode as well, but let's go back to the trip in general. Is there anything aside from the engagement that you would say would be really high up there on the list of wanting to mention, or have we already kind of covered the big things that you would talk about from the experience?
So I knew Germany was a beautiful country. I didn't know that they had as many castles as they do, and I loved it. There was a morning where we were sailing. We were sailing. Trying to remember where we were sailing from. I think the city of Kacham to the city of Koblenz, and that was a stretch we did on the Rhine River, and it was so cool because like I said, there was like a castle almost every other hillside. We saw like a couple dozen castles that morning, and we just sat up on the top of the ship while we were cruising, and our cruise director was actually just like giving a guide to like, this castle is here, this castle, just some information for like over the course of a couple of hours while we saw all these castles on the cruising part, and that was just it was lovely. And so I knew Germany was a beautiful country, and I knew the people were nice in Germany, but everybody just seemed so nice. Everybody was so good. All of the tour guides just had, very, differing sort of like, I see you fitting this stereotype I have of a German, and these stereotypes that we have of Germans is not unreasonable, but nobody's like exactly the way they are, but it's just like, I see where this comes from and I see where that comes from, but like a lot of them just had the driest sense of humor that was just I really appreciated. I specifically want to like describe this one man who was a tour guide for Frankenstein Castle. So I went to visit Frankenstein Castle. It's about a 45-minute drive outside of Frankfurt. And what's interesting is, Frankenstein Castle was built around the middle of the 13th. Well, the first papers that they have to like know the existence that the castle's existence was the middle of the 13th century. It might be older than that. Nobody knows. And this whole tour was like based on the idea of like, all right, everything that you see here is actually a recreation from the 20th century, except for this one building, the chapel. Everything else was rebuilt, 600 years after the original papers that describe the castle, that it exists. Nothing interesting happened here. The castle was never a part of any. There's no violent overthrowing of the castle, no attempt to violently overthrow the castle. It was just there to collect money. Somebody asked, like, hey, did Mary Shelley, did she ever come to Frankenstein Castle as an inspiration for her book? And the tour guide was like, this is the first question that everybody asks, and it will be the last one that I answer. And so he just he talked about the last knight that lived in the castle and how he died. And he was like, oh, was it in a war? No, it wasn't in a war. He got drunk and drove his carriage off the side of the cliff. Like, he just really leaned into how nothing interesting happened at this castle. And there are certain things we just don't know about the castle. And even the name itself is really quite boring. Like, it comes from the word Frank, which is a French people, and Stein, which is stone, because it's built on a granite stone. Like, there's no tunneling into this castle. And he's like, it's a really boring name. It's a really boring castle. Nothing interesting ever happened here. And he just really leaned into it. It was a fabulous tour.
I love every aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah. And now, what is the castle known for? The fact that they in the month of October, they have a huge Halloween party. Like, Halloween is not a thing in Europe. It's an American thing, and Americans made it a thing at that castle. And so now they have something like, they said in 2019, in the before times, last Halloween before the pandemic, they had a little over 100 actors. I don't know if they're volunteer or not, but actors who were dressed up as zombies and ghouls and vampires and probably the Frankenstein monster and so forth, that would put on, do, I guess, a haunted house, or a haunted castle. And they said they have like 3,000 people roll in every night over the course of, I guess so over the course of 10 days, you have 30,000 people that visit the castle. So we love the Americans for this. And it's made a huge amount of money. But yeah, the river cruise is I think the river cruise companies are starting to realize they need to be targeting a younger demographic than they have been. And like this particular cruise had some active and discovery type tours that not just your classic tour. Like they had a bike riding tour, and so I think they're really trying to seek out a different demographic, and I think that's really good because it was a fabulous way to see. It was a fabulous first time to see Europe.
I think the big thing is just getting the word out. It's not something that I had ever heard of. It sounds like I probably would fit the demographic for what they have historically targeted at this point.
Yeah,
like it's because it's just under marketed. Really?
Yeah, they're not trying to get our. They're just now thinking that we should go for a younger demographic. So I think that's why. I think everyone who has heard of it, they think, isn't that for senior citizens? And in the past, that's the demographic that they've been going for, and it's a shame because I think that there's a lot of people, middle-aged and even younger, that would just love to do this. And they have a whole season of doing it at Christmas time, so you can go to all the villages and see have a Christmas version of the experience. The Christmas thing is a very big deal on these river cruises. So,
I'd see a correlation actually with Thornbury. So, one of the things that I found interesting about Thornbury Castle is I never would have even known anything about it if I hadn't specifically been looking for a castle stay that felt like staying in a castle, that wasn't like a castle exterior with a hotel room interior.
Right.
And I happened across it after a number of different, just back and forth links and clicking, and who knows? I don't even know exactly what I followed to get there. But now that I know about it, I pay attention to messaging and their general marketing approach, and they sold to a different hospitality group that did some remodeling, et cetera, et cetera. But the big thing that I've noticed over the past few years is that there's just not much of a marketing presence. Either it exists or you don't. And sure, there's not a whole lot in the immediate vicinity of the castle that would be thought of an attraction to someone, but you can stay in the same room that Henry and Anne Boleyn stayed in.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
a huge draw.
Yeah.
If you can get the word out there. The thing that works against them is that there's only a dozen rooms, maybe there's 14. I don't remember for sure, but I think it's roughly about 12 rooms. And so it is a little pricier, because if you think about just economies of scale, right? If you have a limited number of rooms, you're going to charge a little more for them, etc. And the big thing that's missing is just really putting this out there, that it's staying in a castle, you're using skeleton keys to open the door. Even it feels very much like staying in a castle, which is an experience that is not replicated very often throughout Europe that I've found, based on conversations with other people who have stayed at castles that didn't necessarily feel like castles on the interior. So really leaning into that and getting it out there for the history buff side of things. I feel like it's an underrepresented market segment. Very much like I feel like the river cruise is a underrepresented market segment.
It definitely is. And if they go down the road of offering more of these active and discovery tours in addition to the typical classic tour, I think you will see, or we will see, more of our peers doing this. But I can't recommend it enough. It has everything I want in in a vacation, with the exception of I love going to tropical places, but I was in Europe, and that's I'm not going there for a tropical something or another. I'm going there because it's it's Europe, and there's so much that happened there, and so much still happening there. So it was like, it's definitely like the way I want to do a trip. It was so much fun.
Glad to hear it. And so as a result of the fact that I'm going to, I'm sure, be pestered about it again, I know that Emily has a couple of times requested having you guys out to...
Yeah, we got to do it.
Yeah. So I'm just mentioning it for hopefully the accountability aspect, and that I don't forget, come like 2 or 3 days.
I totally understand.
So I guess I will offer, is there any other kind of wrap-up statement that you have? Does that kind of cover everything? Because if not, I do want to end with a bite.
Okay.
And really just throw the show format to the wind for an episode. But if there's anything else, the floor is yours.
I just thought that the German people were so delightful, just so lovely and delightful. It was unsurprising, but at the same time, did not expect that. So
I can understand, especially when you think about, we always think about the stereotypical description of the harshness of the language. And so even though it doesn't speak to behavior, you create this idea of, if the language is that harsh, the behavior must be as well. Yeah. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
I agree. They're just lovely people. So amusing. Such great senses of humor. So, yeah. That was probably the best part.
So less than 60 seconds for my bite. It's just a mention that as of today, emergency authorization has been granted for boosters in the 5 to 11-year-old age bracket after 5 months.
I saw that, and I was like, hey, let's do it. It's time to do it.
Yep. Like, certainly no reason to spend any time on it. It's just, PSA. This has been done if you haven't seen the information float across your news sources as of this point.
Yeah. I would just, the only thing I would add additional is, like, just what you've been saying is, like, there was a medical issue. There's a medical solution. Talk to your medical provider. They will tell you what you need to know. And once you talk to your medical provider, it's a good idea to follow their recommendations, because they're the ones that know. They're the subject matter expert. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.